We're talking about Sailor Moon again. I have like a really bad case of sinusitis, so sorry if I sound like nasally or weird in this video. I'm probably also going to record it in parts, so if my voice like drastically changes, just sorry about that. But Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon is basically, I would consider it like the quintessential 90s anime in terms of like aesthetic. And I don't think that's just me. If you look up on Google or Ecosia or Pinterest or any like image search for 90s anime or retro anime, a good chunk of what's going to come up, it's going to be stuff like Urusei Yatsura, or it'll be like Mansio Nikoku, or it'll be Sailor Moon. And if you see people and they're doing a art challenge where they're drawing something in quote unquote retro anime art style, it's going to be the Sailor Moon art style. There's like, and it's not just like one person doing it, it's a lot of people. If you just look up 90s anime, sometimes even 80s anime, I think it's just people who kind of confuse the art styles because they're so close. It'll be in Sailor Moon art style. I do know this isn't like Sailor Moon, only Sailor Moon, especially because, you know, the people who made the Sailor Moon anime, they worked on projects after Sailor Moon, before Sailor Moon as well, but especially after Sailor Moon, there's like 1 or 2 or 3 anime that still have like the Sailor Moon art style, even though they're not Sailor Moon. But I think Sailor Moon, you know, it's kind of defined 90s anime, especially 90s shoujo anime. The art style, the way the characters are designed, even the way the show itself is set up, it's very 90s. Not even just art style wise, but like the clothes the characters wear, the hobbies that the characters have in the show. They constantly go to the Crown arcade, where I know arcades are still a thing in Japan, but it's so 90s arcade. And the fashion throughout the whole show, from start to finish, is super 90s and early 90s specifically, but it's very much of its time. And that's like why it ties into a lot of people's nostalgia, I think. Even though it aired in America when it got its first dub, it aired in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's kind of the this is what 90s anime looks like anime. Like I said, it's not just me who thinks this, and it's not just a Google image search thing. If you go onto Etsy and you look for quote unquote retro anime anything, it's Sailor Moon that comes up. If you look for these city pop compilations on YouTube when it comes to music, many of them use GIFs from Sailor Moon as their preview image. There's an entire niche music genre, which is like city pop music, but using Sailor Moon samples, and it's called Sailor Wave. Like, it is very, very much of its time. So, your Toei Animation, your Toei Studios, and your big breadwinners for your company and your animation studio is Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon. And now it's no longer the 90s. It's the early 2000s, and Sailor Moon is really starting to show its age. It's old enough where it's looking a little too old when you compare it to anime coming out in the early 2000s, but it's not old enough where it's an aesthetic choice, where it becomes like nostalgic. It's not old enough for that yet. It's one of your biggest moneymakers in terms of franchises. So what do you do? To kind of set the scene, it's 2003. The last 2 Matrix movies are out in theaters. Disney has put out Brother Bear as their newest movie. That's So Raven, just released on the Disney Channel, and that's one of the big shows at the moment. This is like the pop culture bubble. This is the time frame that we're looking at. It's 2003. Everybody's super depressed because 9/11 happened like 2 years ago, and everybody's like really tense and stressed out. But the internet it's beyond that like early what people use now to make like webcore images. It's not that anymore, but it's not to the point where internet is fast enough where YouTube has launched yet. We're still 3 years away from YouTube coming out. So all the websites are kind of in this awkward in-between phase. Everyone is using Flash for their interfaces. Everything is like very brightly colored, but it's still in the 3:4 aspect ratio. And everything has like that plastic bubbly design to it. You know what I mean? If you look at the old Winamp skins and what Napster used to look like, everything looks like that. Even Windows itself. The anime industry is moving away from cell painting completely, and most anime at this point are fully digitally colored. However, they haven't really figured it out yet, so everything's kind of got this plasticky, oversaturated look to it, which at this point has kind of become its own aesthetic. I think give it like 10 years and that's going to be like what Sailor Moon is now in terms of like hashtag 90s anime aesthetic. That's what this like oversaturated early digital coloring aesthetic is going to be in time. And in terms of like shows that came out, the big release was Full Metal Alchemist came out in 2003. We're still 3 or 4 years away from Naruto coming out, but this is the sphere of things. This is the zeitgeist, that's the word I'm looking for. And Sailor Moon as an anime, it's, you know, it's just a little too old to really sell anymore, and yet it's still pushing merchandise, it's still making a ton of money, and you want to keep riding that train if you're Toei, right? So what do? Well, Toei had another side project where they had a bunch of live action stage shows for Sailor Moon, which was sponsored by Bandai. These ran from 1993, while the anime was still going, all the way until 2005. The live-action Bandai-sponsored Sailor Moon shows ran longer than the anime did. The anime ran from 1992 till 1997. The live-action shows started in 1993, and they just kept going. And when I say they lasted longer than the anime, I literally mean I think there was like 1 or 2 shows in terms of like story per year, all the way up until 2005. I haven't seen all of them. I'm still getting to that. I kind of want to go through all of them. There's so many of them. Also, I'm specifically talking about the Bandai sponsored shows. I'm not talking about the new shows, which were kind of like a revival. And I'm not talking about the Ice show. And there's like another series of live action shows which were sponsored by a different company. I'm specifically talking about the Bandai things. The Bandai sponsored live action Sailor Moon shows. And you know, these weren't like pantomime stage shows that you just take your kids to and you put them down to watch and be quiet for an afternoon. These Sailor Moon shows, some of them would retell specific arcs from the manga and anime, but a lot of them were considered almost like summer specials or winter specials, like special episodes of the anime. You know how you would have sometimes with a lot of anime do this, you have like an OVA special, or they all go to the beach special, like specific episodes that were considered specials and usually only came out on VHS, or they were released with specific magazines and it was like a single episode. That's what the Sailor Moon live action shows are kind of considered to be. And I think they started out intending to be canon with the anime, and then they kind of formed a canon completely their own, where things that happened in the live action stage show storyline is canon to the live action stage show canon and not to the anime. Basically, when it comes to Sailor Moon, you have the manga canon, you have the anime canon, and you have the live action stage show canon. And those 3 things are completely independent from each other. And the live action stage shows, they were really popular. I mean, they would have to be, right? If they lasted longer than the anime, they had to be popular. So Toei thought, well, the anime is a little bit too new to reboot. We can't really exactly remake it. And this was before remakes and reboots were really a thing. There were several anime that had been remade and rebooted by this point. It's not like it was an unheard of thing. They rebooted, I talked about this in a previous video, Mahotsukai Sally came out in 1966, however it did have a 1980s reboot. Actually, a lot of staff that went on to work on Sailor Moon actually worked on the Maho Tsukai Sally reboot. So reboots weren't this unknown thing. However, Sailor Moon had only come out, oh gee, we're gonna have to do maths. If Sailor Moon ended in 1997 and it's now 2003, 6 years. You know, that's a little bit too soon to redo the entire thing. So Toei thought to themselves, okay, we've got this live action stage show set up and it's really popular and doing very well. We want to keep Sailor Moon merchandise going because it's making us, you know, hand over fist money. Why don't we try and do a live action version of Sailor Moon? And this is what they decided to do. They decided to adapt the Sailor Moon manga, the source material again, however this time in live action. This sounds like it makes you go, well, how on earth would you do that? But remember, we're talking about Japan, which has a very, very long-standing tradition of tokusatsu shows. And as I said in the previous video, tokusatsu is actually what inspired Sailor Moon to a large degree in the first place. So to have a live action version of Sailor Moon, it's not as wacky and out there as it first sounds. And this is why in 2003, we got the live action Sailor Moon adaptation, Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon, or PGSM as it's called these days on the internet, just to kind of distinguish it from the other versions of Sailor Moon. Naoko Takeuchi, the original mangaka for Sailor Moon, was actually going to be a lot more involved with the live action version than she was with the anime, because the anime, because it was releasing at the same time as the manga and they didn't really know where Naoko was taking a lot of characters and ideas, and there's a lot of filler in the Sailor Moon anime. The Sailor Moon anime is 200 episodes long, and I think the majority of it is technically filler. The only reason they get away with it in terms of, unlike an anime like One Piece where it'll have like an entire story arc which is just filler, Sailor Moon is a monster of the day show, and the filler episodes give characters the chance to interact with each other, and we get to explore the relationship that they have with each other, both as friends or romantic partners, or what makes them tick, or what gets them angry. We get a lot more time to develop that aspect of them, and not even just the main characters. The villains, I feel, are much better in the anime than in the manga, simply because they get the time to get developed as characters, rather than just showing up for one chapter and getting killed immediately at the end of the chapter. So the anime is kind of more the product of its directors and writers that worked on it. They took Naoko's ideas, and although they tell the overall stories that are in the manga, there are massive differences between them, not just in terms of the finale, where the finale for the anime came out 3 days after the finale of the manga. Like, that's how close they were in terms of when one came out and when the other one came out. However, like I said, Naoko wasn't very involved with the writing process or the development process of the anime. There was some correlation, obviously, because there's stories, and she has said in some of her art books, she would design a character and there would be talk between Toei and her and the marketing department, and they would ask her to change character designs or tweak them so that they're better for animation or better for dolls or merchandising. An example is the 3 lights in the 5th season, the Sailor Stars season. They were originally supposed to have short hair, and the marketing department actually asked her to design them with long hair, just because it makes for better dolls. Dolls with long hair sell better than dolls with short hair, and that's why they have the rat tails. That's the only reason they have those rat tails. But with the live action show, Naoko was a lot more involved right from the start, both in writing and in character design. And as a result, the live action Sailor Moon show is kind of its own completely different thing. It's not just the anime as a live action rehash. And the thing is, despite this, I don't see a lot of people online, as far as the Western fans go, talk about it. A lot of the Sailor Moon fans are very much aware that it's a thing that exists, and they know that this is a live action show. They know when it came out. They probably even know the name of the actresses. They know that Naoko was involved. They know a lot of the character designs that were only used in the live action show and not in any of the other products, not even the games or anything. So why is it that nobody really talks about the live action show? It is remembered, and there is a lot of archiving in terms of the show and some of its background material and interviews with the cast and things like that. And, you know, you gotta ask, okay, well, how come, even though the anime was super popular online, even before you could really download videos on the internet, because you're on dial-up and your modem only downloads 56 kilobytes per second, people were still sharing information about the anime and the manga. People were sharing scanlations, people were sharing the intro, the anime intros, sharing video clips. They were adapting the anime into like fanfic form so that people can read it when they don't have access to it. Why didn't the live action show get this treatment? Okay, look, I fully understand. The reason it took me until 2020 to watch this show is because my only exposure to it had been screenshots of Sailor Luna and the 2003 TV budget special effects and plushy Luna and Artemis nightmare fuel. And I'd seen video clips of it. I'd seen the video clips of the transformation sequence, some of the attacks. I saw it. And again, Sailor Luna's transformation and her attack, which is basically to throw candy at the bad guys, that was enough for me to be like, you know what? I don't know if I want to see some of my favorite characters in anime portrayed under these circumstances. I get it. I fully understand. But here's the thing, right? Like I said, it took me until 2020 to watch this show. And the only reason I ended up watching it is because a Tumblr blog I really like was doing a live blog of first the anime and then the manga. And I read through the entire backlog of the 200 episodes of the anime. And then I caught up with the manga live blog and I wanted more content. And they had also reacted to PGSM. So I started reading that just because I needed more content from them. And I got up until I think episode 4 or 5 in the live blog, and the way they were describing the characters and the plot, I was like, this actually sounds really good. I ended up wondering whether I should watch it first. And then I decided, okay, well, I'll watch a few episodes and see if I can stand it, if I can like put up with the way it looks and everything. And then it got to the point of, you know what, this is actually pretty good. And then it got to like episode 6 or so and I was like, holy shit, this is actually a really good show. And it's very funny because if you look at my Tumblr post, it's like 9 months ago, I don't know if I should watch this. 9 months ago, you know what, this isn't that bad. 8 months ago, I love this show, I love these characters. 7 months ago, everybody should watch the show. So I do get it. And I also understand that the other reason it doesn't get the clout that the anime and manga does is because, well, first of all, it's not an anime. You know, it's live action. And again, I understand. I'm an animator. I work in the industry. I did not watch live action shows until I was like 22. I only watched cartoons. I understand. And I also understand that in 2003, anime was only just starting. It was just starting to become something that people other than hardcore otaku nerds were aware of because of things like Toonami and Adult Swim and the internet. People were starting to learn more about anime and manga, and it was becoming more accessible. However, it started with teenagers and stuff, and again, animated and manga, but you know, comic books. And then you have live action and it's like, what the hell, this isn't anime, this isn't hand-drawn, this is like real people and stuff. So I do understand that's part of it, and I understand that if you are already biased against live action because you're an anime fan, seeing the CG effects is not gonna sell you on it. You know, it would have to literally be 2020 Hollywood quality movie special effects to sway people who are already biased against it for not being animated. And you know, this show had the budget of like a box of tissues per episode or something. It's a very low budget show. I don't know how it compares to other tokusatsu shows. However, I haven't really seen anything official say, oh, it had a small budget because of X and Y reasons. I think it literally was just functioning within the budget of a tokusatsu show, especially because Toei was and still is one of the main producers of tokusatsu, so they know how much a show of this nature is going to cost. And the director of the entire PGSM show, he himself is a tokusatsu director. He has worked within this genre with these kinds of effects and stuff. He knows how to handle a show like this. This is just what shows like this look like. Again, if you compare it to something like Charmed, which ignoring the writing and characters, the way Charmed special effects looks is comparable to PGSM. It's of its time. But I'm here to tell you that watching the show for the first time in 2020 with zero nostalgia, this show is 100% worth your time. I'm not even going to say something like, oh well, if you look past the special effects and if you look past the plushy nightmare fuel, it's actually pretty good once you get into it. No, it's a good show. That's it. I don't need to justify it. I don't need to excuse it. It is a good show. Especially if you're already a Sailor Moon fan. Not because you come in with a bias in its favor, but because if you're a Sailor Moon fan, you have been through the Dark Kingdom arc of Sailor Moon 3 times by now. You went through it with the anime, you went through it with the manga, you went through it with the Crystal anime, and if you're like a bigger, more hardcore fan, you've probably gone through it with the musicals as well, probably with the novelization as well if you're like super, super hardcore about it. So why go through the Dark Kingdom arc again? And this is where I start struggling a little, because if you're already a Sailor Moon fan, you know exactly what the story beats for the Dark Kingdom arc is. You are the perfect person to watch this show because of the way it takes the source material and goes, hey, this is a very interesting idea in the manga, which we didn't really expand upon. Let's focus on that. Let's add to that. Let's not change what's there, but let's take what's there and like add more content to it. That's what this show is. And I'm struggling because the biggest joy of this show is knowing what the story is for the Dark Kingdom arc and coming into it and seeing how this show warps what's already there into something with a lot more substance to it. However, I can't sit here and give you a play-by-play for what is different, because then I am robbing you of the experience of discovering why the plot is so different. You understand? It's this catch-22 of, you should watch this because it's a lot different than Sailor Moon's Dark Kingdom arc and all its other variations, but I can't tell you what those variations are. So this is what I'm going to do. I am going to run through the characters, and I will explain how the characters in PGSM take what the anime and manga offer and build upon it. Because I feel that is a way for me to illustrate the changes without me spoiling what they changed plot-wise. And this isn't like, forgive the very timely reference, this isn't like the Final Fantasy VII Remake where, spoilers if you are not aware of this, the Final Fantasy VII Remake starts off as a shot-for-shot remake of the original PlayStation game, and then by the end of it, it introduces concepts where it tells you that this story might go in its own complete different direction, where something is messing up with the literal canon of the original game and changing it into something else. This isn't that. This isn't where it starts off following the original anime and then diverges into a completely new route. It's still the same plot. All the characters we know are here. All the story beats we know are here. It's just the way they are handled and expanded upon that's different. And the best way I can do that is to literally go through our main characters and explain, this is how it is in the anime, and this is how PGSM handled those same characters. Because unlike the anime, PGSM has the advantage of hindsight. At this point, the entire anime has been put out, the entire manga has been published. The creators of PGSM are clearly very passionate about the material already, so they know the story, they know where this arc ends, and they know what they're building towards, so they know what they can tweak and add to without it being superfluous, because they know how it builds upon the overall story. So again, my best way of explaining to you why you should watch the show without giving away major changes is to go, this is this character, and this is how they are here, and this is how they are there. And also, I just want to be very clear, I'm not doing this to say PGSM is such an improvement over the manga and anime. That's not what I'm saying. What I am trying to say, however, is if you are already super familiar with these characters and the storyline, PGSM is a perfect show for you because what it does with things you already know. By that same token, I would actually not recommend PGSM as your entry level to Sailor Moon, unless you're somebody where you are a tokusatsu fan more than you're an anime fan, and you want to know the Sailor Moon story, but you don't have much of a tolerance for anime and anime tropes. That is like the only reason I would suggest making PGSM your entry into Sailor Moon. Also, unless you're like somebody who prefers shows like Charmed and you prefer Buffy, like Xena and those things, those are more your kind of bread and butter, then also this is probably a good show for you. But if you're somebody where you're interested in Sailor Moon as a whole, don't start with PGSM. Start with either the manga or the anime. Even Sailor Moon Crystal, if you want like a condensed version. I'm not a fan of it, but it does have its fans and I do understand why it has fans. It's not for me. So with that extremely long diatribe out of the way, let's just get started with Sailor Moon herself.